wondering how I got into this mix. Mind playing tricks.
This is Derek Rose with the Conscious Resistance Network. Today I'm excited to bring you guys another new guest, somebody that I recently just discovered their work and we're quickly becoming friends because we're working on similar goals and this movement towards a more conscious, a more free, a more just and compassionate world. For those who've been paying attention to my work recently, as we transition away from just philosophizing about these ideas and actually putting agorism in action, going towards using freedom cells and land projects, the ideas of permaculture have been becoming increasingly important in my life. And gardening has been for a long time, but more and more permaculture specifically is. And I've been trying to develop this idea of bringing agorism and mindfulness, non-aggression principle, self-ownership together, and some synthesis of these ideas. And recently I discovered somebody else was already working on this idea, so that's always good to find out that there's like minds working on similar ideas. So I'd like to introduce to you guys Eric McCool. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing very well.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today. Like I was saying, we're just now meeting, so we're getting to know each other through this interview, basically, and we get to share that conversation with an audience. But the reason I wanted to reach out to you, as I was saying, I was introduced to your website, and I started perusing what you've got on there, and not just the information related to agorism or to the synthesis with permaculture, but just looking at the way you and with your family seem to be living your lives and pursuing a different lifestyle. I think that's also important to talk about and to show people examples of families who are really trying to raise their children and live in a conscious way, and along with that, recognizing that we have the power within our own selves and how we can instill that in the next generation. So I feel like we got a lot to talk about. So let's start off first with letting you share a little bit about who you are as a human being, and then we'll talk a little bit about the website and what you're working on now.
Sure. I've got my interest in a lot of different things, and I stay pretty busy. I've focused over my whole life. I'd say my first title would be I'm a writer and an author, and I love language and words, and I also study languages, but I studied philosophy and history in college, and I continued to study those things afterwards. I think they're really important. And I got into permaculture a few years ago, and so permaculture, being a permaculture designer and a permaculture theorist, is something that I kind of identify with. I feel like that's really the thrust of my work, is to design solutions to all these problems that are pretty self-evident. And so we do homesteading and we do gardening and food production as much as we can. We're really students of it. My wife and I have been doing this for about 6-7 years now, and we're still pretty new at it, and we're still learning every year. But we try to divide our time between the gardens and between, for me especially, the world of getting ideas out there and promoting solutions and promoting alternative ideas to how we could live our lives and arrange our societies. And another big emphasis of it is our kids. We have 3 kids, and we're home/unschooling them and also world schooling them. We like to think that the world is the campus and everything that we do is educational, and we try to take them out into the world and do the things that we would be doing anyway, both outdoor adventures and going to people's farms and helping out work parties and going to gatherings of people that are in localized community settings. I think that's a really important thing. So that's a general overview of what I'm up to now. And there's a bunch more that's going to be on the website. But yeah, there's a whole lot going on right now that I'm trying to get plugged into. And agorism and permaculture as a philosophical combination, I think that's a pretty key thing right now.
Absolutely. So you were telling me before we started the interview about an experience you had in the past year. I think you said that really helped you realize how you could bring these ideas together, and that was going to the Acapulco conference. So tell me a little bit about that conference and what really was the catalyst for you recognizing that it wasn't just going to be permaculture alone that was going to help you go in the direction you want to.
Sure. So here I am studying permaculture. I'm in the Northwest, and I hang out with a lot of permies and a lot of activists, and these are people that are real passionate about ecology and the environment and social justice issues. And I feel like there's a lot of good work being done, but everybody's kind of powerless because there's really no money, and everyone's got other work they have to do, and farmers are busy farming, and it's hard to fight GMO in court when you're farming, and there's just the support network for permaculture isn't there. And when I went to Acapulco, I felt like I'd found a potential support network, mainly because all the people I was meeting in Acapulco were all into these revolutionary ideas of smashing the state and introducing totally voluntary systems as a way to run our societies. And I thought, yes, but you're going to need permaculture if you're going to do that, because permaculture sets up abundant systems that don't need as much management and that work better with non-hierarchical kind of situation. So I guess I just saw that both groups kind of needed each other, and there didn't seem to be a lot of cross-pollination. There was some. There were quite a few people at the conference that were real savvy to permaculture, but a whole bunch of other people that weren't. And I just thought, perfect, we can join forces here and we can work together. And I was also real motivated by Anarchapulco because I guess I felt like I had hope again that there were enough people out there that were ready to do something. Because, you know, you live, even in a place like where I live, where there's a lot of activists and there's a lot of really well-meaning people, they seem to have already given up, some of them, to the fact that the state's there and we have to just bow to their regulations and rules. And I really like being around the kind of people that say, screw it, I don't care what rules they write, we're going to do what we know we need to do, and we know it's right. And community rights movement, the idea of local communities banding together to fight, to pass laws that fight corporate infringement of their land and stuff. So these are all things that I sort of got lit up about at Anarchapulco. And shortly after that trip, I started building my website and creating this whole project of Permagora, which is all about the synthesis of these philosophies and a way to sort of bring everybody together so we can work together to make changes.
So was the Anarchapulco conference, was that your first introduction to Agorism, or had you already heard about the ideas before that?
No, I had heard about it mainly from James Corbett and you. I mean, I had heard the word and I knew about Samuel L. Konkin, Samuel Konkin. I learned about him from James Corbett, and then I saw an interview that you did with James Corbett about agorism that really got me excited about it, and so I started reading more into it. And even before that, I feel like I could have already identified as an anarchist. Agora as a concept was new to me, but for many years I'd already, and really my whole life, I've always kind of felt like authority is a hoax and it's just bully gangsterism basically. And I never thought it was legitimate, but you kind of do what you got to do to not get whipped. So, but yeah, I guess I feel like Anarchapulco was not so much a changing, turning me into like an anarchist or an agorist as much as it was giving me hope that there were others out there and that there was sort of a common ground and a common language being spoken amongst people who were starting to come to these conclusions and move in this direction.
Absolutely. I definitely will, concur with that. I mean, I've seen it in my work, with just promoting these ideas. I first was introduced to the ideas of Agorism, I think in 2011, and just started to really, the first time I heard it, it was through a friend of mine, John Bush, who lives in Austin. He's also a real prominent activist, and he came down to Houston for a In the Fed rally at the time we were hosting, and it was, we're talking about the problems of the Federal Reserve and this and that. And, looking back, I'm like, man, you do what you think feels right at the time, right? But then you recognize later how sometimes some actions you were taking maybe weren't really the best to serve your cause, or maybe they were even futile, and not actually helping or getting you closer to what you thought you were trying to get at, but they helped you. They're sort of self-serving. But John gave this really amazing speech and just said, if we're trying to end the Federal Reserve, you have to stop using the Federal Reserve note, and really just like made so clear in my mind, like, okay, how can we continue to talk about these systems, whatever they may be? You mentioned GMOs, food production systems, whatever it is, to talk against them yet continue to use those same systems is just, it's foolhardy. It's just, it's insane, really. We're not going to get anywhere closer to our goals. So to me, agorism is simply just the way to be as principled as possible and to put your actions and your thoughts and your words in alignment, which is what I try to do as an individual who considers myself to be a spiritual person, from Buddhist and meditation practice, constantly trying to make sure that my thoughts and my words, they all align with my actions, and then as an activist, as an individual, just doing the same in the physical world as well. So to me, they complement each other well. Now, what I want to talk about now is, so how do you see, for those who are unaware, briefly, agorism, counter-economics is the idea, the strategy, the philosophy of using the black and gray markets, moving into the counter economy instead of the statist mainstream economy, and taking away our economic power from the state, reclaiming that, and in the process also building counter institutions, new things that can serve the people and that are decentralized and not going to create the situation we're in now. So that idea and that strategy is what more of us are moving into, and a lot of people, without even realizing it, they're already in the counter economy. They're already agorists because they let somebody mow their lawn and they pay them in cash, right? You're still using the Federal Reserve note, but you're not paying taxes. There's no regulation. There's no licenses. That's the first step to getting into the counter economy. Of course, the next step would be to not even use their currency and to barter, gift, trade, local currency, alternative currency, Bitcoin, whatever you have, and start taking that power away and finding new ways to create things. So we understand that concept. Now, give the audience a brief rundown of what permaculture itself is, and then let's talk about how the two intersect.
Okay. All right, so permaculture is defined a lot of different ways, and I don't think there's any one official definition. But essentially, it's a design system that bases our interaction with the landscape on natural energy movement. And so it's a reason I align it with agorism and non-aggression is because it's basically the non-aggression principle applied to farming. Conventional farming is a forceful act, and it's generally a violent act. And tearing up the soil to plow is a destruction of the soil microcommunities, and killing of all the weeds that you don't want growing. They're growing for a reason. They're there to just repair the disturbed soil. And civilization is built on this act of aggression that is agriculture. And agriculture leaves damaged land behind. It denudes and ruins the land. And so permaculture is an approach to agriculture. It was designed by a guy named Bill Mollison and another guy named David Holmgren, who are Australians. And it was in response to agriculture. He called it permaculture because he meant permanent agriculture. Agriculture, as we now know it, is not sustainable. It reaps huge harvests from the land until the land is unsustainable, and then it collapses, and then they move on, and they leave desert behind. And he wanted to envision permanent food systems that don't do that and that don't ruin the land. So permaculture is a design system whereby we interact with the land in a whole systems dynamic way, and we consider the big picture, and we are creating a type of abundance that doesn't extract its value from future costs that have to be paid back. In other words, you're not just getting all this fertility out of the land and at the same time collapsing it. You're actually making the land more fertile as you reap your yields. And there's so much to say about permaculture. It's very hard to encapsulate it, but the permaculture community is really, it's an educational community teaching people these principles, the design principles of permaculture. And there's quite a few of them, but they have to do with observation. You spend more time in observation before you make changes. And you want to try and obtain a yield, and you want to try to get more than one function out of different elements. You want to try and arrange things in such a way as they do multiple things, like shade you, provide leaves for mulch, and provide fruits, provide branches. Everything kind of does that already, but modern systems, both in the way we design our houses and the way food systems are set up, they don't take maximum advantage of natural situations. A perfect example would be, tract homes that are just facing the street rather than orienting to get the maximum amount of passive solar heating and cooling. And there's just all these things that civilization does so wrong. And permaculture is an art and a science and a philosophy that tries to recognize that and fix those things by creating smarter systems that are more integrated into nature. So that is a pretty lengthy explanation.
No, I appreciate that, and I like the concept of, and this is sort of how I felt when I've been trying to explain it to people, and how I was explaining to you the triangle of applying non-aggression to our actions, of mindfulness through nonviolent communication. So you think about your relationships in general, and for me it extends to my diet as well. I know that not for everybody it does, but I think as well permaculture helps extend the non-aggression principle, as you were saying, towards the planet itself and towards the concept of agriculture, because most of the processes that are typically used are invasive, and they're not working in a complementary fashion with the planet itself. Before we break off a little bit further into some other areas, I wanted to just stick on this particular issue with permaculture. I have a friend who's a cob builder, and he's also into permaculture and other alternative building methods and such. And recently we had a discussion where he was expressing his frustration with the permaculture community, and this is, I guess, at large generally, so I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule, but how just basically he wasn't really attacking anymore, but more asking the question, how can we make permaculture more of an open an open philosophy, an open idea, an open concept to lower income and essentially people of color who can't afford some of the expensive prices for permaculture schooling and education and training. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Actually, I do. It's funny you should bring that up. I spoke at a permaculture convergence up in Northern Oregon a few years back, and my presentation was about a local community I was working with. I was a part of the core team of a localization effort where we were attempting to create something real similar to your freedom cells. This idea of we should get together locally and help each other out with stuff and plan for various things and work on various projects that benefit us all. We were doing this, and I had to explain to the permaculture community at Forest Grove, I had to say, look, we are undercover permaculturists down where I live, because it was not a permaculture friendly community. It wasn't really what it is. It's a language barrier. Permaculture is great for college educated middle class people who like intellectualizing some of these concepts and like to look at all the charts and like to have this sort of, arsenal of knowledge. But there's a lot of farm and rural people in the world who already know how to grow crops, and they take offense to city folk coming out and trying to tell them how to do it all differently. And it's tough because they're both right and they're both wrong. It's like the permaculturists are right that the farmers aren't doing their land a favor by tilling it every year and by adding all these pesticides. And yet the farmers are right that these permaculture people, a lot of them, and I'm not trying to speak out against anybody, but it's easy to do when you get excited about the notion. You want to tell everybody, and you go around often. I did the same, preaching to people like you know something they don't. And they're like, who the hell are you, So I guess also when it comes to lower income people, really what it amounts to is I feel like permaculture ought to evolve, and perhaps we ought to see more manifestations of permaculture education taking place, some of them being geared at people who don't want the highfalutin version. They just want to get out and do stuff, and maybe we don't have as much terminology and as much theory. It's really just more about anyone can learn how to graft, anyone can learn how to do the basic chores that it takes to build soil. And so if we just sort of created a movement that didn't use the term permaculture, because it does sort of sets up an us and them kind of culture. It's like, oh, if you don't know what it is, then we don't have anything to say. And it's hard to explain permaculture to somebody who doesn't think there's already a problem, And so it's easier, I think, to just take it issue by issue. And anything that you learn about in permaculture, you could easily just have a module or a workshop or some sort of educational process that you teach the pieces of it. And as people show aptitude and interest, they can sort of be, I almost look like that. It's like an inner loop, and it's not like a secret society, it's open source. But those who really want to get into it, it's a smaller group of people that have the time and the sort of mindset for that, because not everybody likes to look at it so philosophically and so analytically. And there are plenty of people that would just rather farm. And I feel like we want to make room for everybody in this movement, and we want to work together. We don't want the people that want to do the theorizing and the map drawing, the architects sort of. We don't want them feeling lofty and more elevated than the guys that are digging the ditches. And yet, we all have to work together. We've all got our jobs to do. So it is going to be challenging to get this whole message out to people, mainly because it's expensive. Like if you have property, first of all, permaculture usually is marketed to people who have a backyard, who have land that they own, that they're willing to spend money on permanent investment like trees and landscaping. And so it automatically excludes people, seemingly. Now, there are, of course, ways to do permaculture. Even if you're just living in an apartment, you can still get into a community garden. You can still have container gardens. You can still go to educational things. But as you said, the classes, they cost money. Everything costs money. And so having educational organizations that help promote this kind of thing is huge. But again, it comes down to funding. Who's going to pay for that, and what's going to be their motivation? And so I feel like it's going to take people like us that are already kind of straddling the world between on-the-ground activism and permaculture, garden, rebeautifying the earth, and internet idea spreading. We sort of have to, I feel like, rally together the sort of support and conversation that it's going to take in order to get funding together to create some of these things that need to be created in order to help this become more accessible to everybody.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that what's going to have to take place is similar to in the sort of anarchist philosophy, the voluntarist philosophy. There's often a discussion against the ideas of intellectual property and of owning concepts and ideas. I just think that we have to take that mindset and sort of free the knowledge as it relates to permaculture, and be the ones to provide the spaces and the communities where people can come and maybe have like a work trade and learn all these things, so that then they can go in and apply them skills. Because I know that I personally can't afford $3,000 or $4,000 permaculture certificate or whatever, but I have tons of interest and I learn where I can. But I think that that's definitely just an important issue that we'll have to face as we move forward, and I appreciate you commenting on that. Some other things I wanted to talk with you about, man, is you mentioned the world schooling, the unschooling concept with your family, and I was looking on the website and saw some of the blog and stuff, and saw like a recent camp you guys took them to. What are your thoughts, as it relates to your children? And I mean, did you plan to have children, or is this something that happened and you've had to sort of look at the world anew and decide, how do I raise these children with these views that I have? How do I deal with this world? What's that like for you? After everything you discussed, how permaculture is so important to your life, how agorism is becoming important to your life, and these concepts, how does that play into you as a parent and the way that you show them the world?
Well, it's definitely it's a huge factor in all of our lives. My kids were born into this, and they I hope that they want to continue with this kind of work in any different way. There's a lot of ways they could, but they're going to do what they're going to do. But I definitely revolve our world around all of these concepts, and I think they support each other really well. The permaculture and the activism and the action, just being active in the community, is part of their schooling. We take them places where we do work, and they learn about threshing grain and about harvesting things and about working together to build something, and they learn about the social dynamics of groups coming together and voluntarily creating things to do, content, parties, potlucks. This is all sort of part of agorism, is just doing things with our community. And so anyhow, their education is built into all of that, and it did kind of come. I didn't know I was going to be having a family when I did. I planned on having family earlier in my life, and I expected I would someday. It was one of those things like, well, maybe someday, but the world just looked so messed up, and it didn't seem like I was ever going to have the stability to do that well. But when I met my wife, she already had 2 kids, and they were fairly young when we met, and so I was a step parent before I became a parent, and our 3rd child is mine. And so since she came around, the family situation is definitely that changes the dynamic, and I've just been really fortunate. I've been fortunate in that I've been able to find situations that I call agorist deals. Instead of paying rent and having a job and doing the normal life, I always manage to find these deals where I meet somebody who has a place for me to stay, and they've got work for me, and it's all sort of under the table. And so because of that, I've always kind of worked from home, and the girls and my wife and I spend a lot of time together, and we've been able to just sort of, our education of them has always been unschooling. We call it homeschooling to people, who need to hear that, but really we just let them do what they do, and we give them books, and we read to them, and we talk with them. I sit down and just have talks with my girls about history and about the state of the world, current events. And one thing that's fun about being an unschooling parent is that I can just, I can teach these kids the truth that I wish I had been taught. And of course, it's my version of the truth. I'm not trying to say that I've got it all figured out, but I know that there's lies being taught to most people, and I can spare my children the process of having to come to terms with the fact that they've been taught all these lies. It's like, just tell them the truth from the beginning about the financial system, about the illegitimate governments that use force on us all, about the natural systems that exist that we could all live in harmony with if we just paid more attention to those, and spiritual aspects of things as well. We weave all of that in, and it's become quite a fun thing, and it actually is. It's a good excuse for us to get out there and go do fun adventure stuff. It's like, oh, well, we need to have a lesson on the ecology of the coast. So let's go out to the redwoods and hang out there for a while. And it sort of gives us an excuse to just do what we love and not feel like, we don't want them to think of school, oh, I have to go to school. We want them to not even have that word for school. We want them to just live and learn from life. And similar for me, I don't want to have to work. I just want to go be a part of the things that I think are valuable and important. And I know that if we had a balanced, established agorist system, I wouldn't have to have a job. I would just divide my time amongst places where I could be useful and where I wanted to be. And by being there, I would extract some sort of gains for myself, be it food or be it Bitcoin or be it something that I can use to buy things in the future and to travel. But I guess I feel like there's a way to weave all of these things together, but it's sort of an experiment, and so we're learning as we go.
Absolutely, man. We're definitely learning as we go. That's why I think it's so exciting, is because we're just, I'm sitting there talking to people about freedom cells and explaining what I've thought of and what our groups have sort of worked on, but then I'm like, but literally this idea is living right now. Whatever we do with it, all these, there's just so much potential between a number of activists, and these ideas are converging with taking the full spectrum of nonviolence and non-aggression to the planet, to our communication, to our children, to our relationships in general, and to the way we deal with authority and power. So it's so amazing to see them coming together. And I also do believe, and I've seen examples, that the network you're discussing is, we're building it right now. We're a part of it. It's a living, breathing thing, and it's unfolding. And there are people that are coming up behind us that are going to do things that we probably can't even imagine. But I have 2 friends who live in Austin. John Bush, I mentioned him, and his wife, they have 2 kids, and they have this Bitcoin bus, they call it, and they've done 3 cross-country tours using only Bitcoin and just traveling with their kids and sort of talking about unschooling, peaceful parenting, talking about Bitcoin and Agorism. And they're some of the people working on the Freedom Cell idea as well, because Kat, John's wife, is really working on the concept and how to use that for, how it relates to parents, and, just applying it in that fashion. So there's a lot of great things happening right now, lots of potential. So I hope everyone who's listening really takes that in and sees that there's good things happening. If you don't pay attention to the circus and you let go of that, that 2-party puppet show and you learn to start looking for answers locally, there really are a lot of things to be happy about. And anything else you want to leave us with? What can we expect? I know you said the website's live, but it's not really officially launched yet. You're really kind of getting it off the ground. What do you have? What are the plans that you have for it coming up?
Well, it's funny. It ties right into what you were saying. You were talking about there are positive things happening if you know where to look. That's what I want my website to be, is a window into solutions. And I want it to be, I'm kind of going out there and collecting as many examples and as many relationships with people who are actively working towards solutions as I can, and documenting it and sharing it with the world, and attempting cross-pollination amongst all of it. And the website, I'll be posting regularly for a while because I've got a lot of backlog material, but it's a combination of journalism and reporting on active action issues, either political or permaculture and land ecology related, as well as adventure travel and educational processes in a sort of outside of the box system with my kids and our unschooling situation. So adventure travel, unschooling, and permaculture agorism are sort of the three main focuses. And I'll be putting out all sorts of content, video interviews, eventually video pieces that are more edited and stuff, but I'm not to that level yet. And mostly photojournalism, and trying to put in perspective what I see as what's forming. Like you said, this is an amorphous growing thing that we don't know what it's going to do, how it's going to grow. But I feel like what I want to be doing with my website is working on presenting the image of what it is that's growing to the world, both to people who are already involved and already inspired to be part of this whole movement, and to, I know, a lot of people that are still back in the old world, sitting on their computer in the Matrix, wondering what the heck's going on and what they should do about it. And I feel like they're just ripe for, they want to jump ship, and we need to give them a landing place to come to when they jump. And so that's what I feel like this network's task is to build infrastructure and build relationships so that we can encompass more people who want to do something different, counter-economics kind of thing. And I want the website to be a way to document all of that and promote all of those ideas. So I'm looking forward to bringing lots of content over the rest of this summer and onwards.
Awesome, man. You're doing some really awesome, great work. I'm so excited for us to connect, and really thankful that the universal consciousness right now is just putting it in multiple people's minds. Permaculture, agorism, these ideas need to come together.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's others who see the connection as well. So I look forward to helping propagate this message and creating some new things in our world. And hopefully, man, I would love to come take a trip and spend some time up there with you and get to see what you guys are working on. And I mean, that's kind of what I've been doing in preparation of us getting our land. I went to stay at Adam Kokash's land in Arizona for a little bit. I went to my grandmother's farm in Kentucky and stayed with her for a couple of weeks she's got a really awesome, project there, and just lots going on there. So I spent a couple of weeks with her, and I'm going to go stay with Quinn and some of the guys at Garden of Eden in Dallas. And they're another really awesome farm out there, and just trying to connect with other people who are doing this and get some more hands-on experience as we prepare to do it ourselves and see how we can all help each other in the process, man. So I'd love to come out sometime soon.
We'd love to have you, man. It'd be great to show you around. There's lots going on out here. There's lots to see. So, and likewise, I'm going to be coming to Texas next year, and I'm hoping to get in touch down there with a whole bunch of people, and it'd be great to meet in person and continue the conversation.
Sounds great, brother. Let's stay in touch and let's build this beautiful thing we're talking about. So the website is permagora.com, correct?
That's right.
All right. Is that the easiest way to contact you if people want to get in touch?
Yeah, I think so. Although honestly, I don't even know if I think the contact thing has my email address listed. So yeah, you could also, if not though, you could email me at ericmccool.gmail. What is it? ericmccool@gmail.com. I hardly ever use email anymore now because everything's all on Facebook and text these days, it seems. But yeah, ericmccool@gmail.com, permagora.com. Check out the material, and I definitely hope to be in more conversation with you and others about all of this stuff, because that's what it's all about. It's all about having conversation and growing the idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for listening. Please be sure to check out permagora.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook for more information. As always, you are powerful, you are beautiful, you are free. Peace.